afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Rebel News live stream on this, a Friday, pardon me, November 22nd, 2024. I'm David Menzies, and my co-host, well, let me tell you a bit about my co-host, shall I? Do you know, folks, we are almost completely through National Family Literacy Month, which happens every November. And I asked my friend, are you going to be celebrating National Family Literacy Month? And she said to me, quote, I don't got no time for that, end quote. And I said, well, based on your answer, I think you better make some time. She is the she-devil with a spatula. She is the Khaleesi of the greater Coburg area. She is Tamara Ugolini. How you doing there, Tamara?
David, I'm always just so smitten and simultaneously shocked by your enthusiasm with the introductions. Thank you. What is family literacy? I guess I'm pretty literate when it comes to family since I have such a big one.
You know, I'll tell you a true story. It was in the early 80s, and it was one of the East Coast provinces, either Nova Scotia or New Brunswick. I think it was New Brunswick. And the Toronto Star had done at the time a huge investigative piece on illiteracy in Canada and showing the rates province to province. And for whatever reason, the rates were pretty bad on the East Coast. So the school board, the Department Ministry of Education, I believe New Brunswick, I stand to be corrected on that, but I think I have this right. They printed up 15,000 booklets about, you know, starting programs to get adults who are illiterate to come, you know, after work, you know, learn English, learn how to read and write, and so on and so forth. Very, you know, well-meaning. They had to recall the pamphlets, Tamara Ugolini, because the title of the pamphlet was "Let's Stamp Out Literacy."
Oh, no.
So whoever was in charge of that headline was in fact
failure.
Illiterate.
Absolute failure. Oh, unsurprising for things that come from the government. Now, just a couple of housekeeping points. If you're joining us, we're streaming on a few different platforms. I think actually just YouTube and Rumble. And so because we've been completely demonetized from YouTube for wrong speak and wrong think and going against the grain and what is coined the acceptable consensus of things, including the COVID hysteria and other government sanctioned narratives, we urge you to hop on over to Rumble, which we're calling the free speech platform, because they have not demonetized us. And on Rumble, you can give us what's called a Rumble rant. And so for a small monetary donation, we like to say $5 or more if you're feeling like giving extra these days. Then we will read your comment on air and provide comment, feedback, or maybe you just have something that you'd like to say and get across. So send us a Rumble rant over on the Rumble platform. And then I don't know about anybody else, but I am already frantically, actually, I shouldn't say me, my children are already frantically counting down the days until Christmas, and they're reminding me every day how many days is left until Christmas Day. And so I'm wearing one of our fun Christmas designs. It's maybe a little bit dated now, but for anybody, it's Hong Kong Convoy Christmas, and there's some photos of trucks in the bottom there, and then it says Hong Kong at the very bottom. Super fun design. And so we've just relaunched all of our Christmas designs at rebelnewsstore.com. And we have also launched a new Christmas code where you can save 15% off of your total order. So this is a great way for you to support our work here at Rebel News and also sport some swag out in the wild, or maybe you'd like to gift some to your liberal loving family members this holiday season. So we're using the code RebelXmas. And I know even that the term Xmas is a little bit controversial, but I mean, here we don't shy away from that, but it was for ease of typing in that code. So if you load up your cart, you go to the checkout, you can put Rebel Xmas, or I think we did also do Rebel Christmas for anybody who is not illiterate and can spell that. You can use Rebel Christmas in the checkout to save 15% off of your total order. Or if you'd like to just short form it, Rebel Xmas. There's some really fun designs in there. I'm not sure if we'll do anything more than what is in the store now, but I'm going to be ordering a new updated sweater. And, you know, a lot of families do like ugly sweater gatherings, ugly Christmas sweater gatherings. And so there's some really great designs for that. That's the one I'm going to order right there. All I want for Christmas is a new Prime Minister. I personally also tried to insinuate that we should get a Trudeau as the Grinch stealing presents design made. So actually, why don't you guys let us know in the comments if you'd like to, if you would actually purchase something like that, if you would like to see a fun design with Trudeau as the Grinch, appropriating the Grinch who stole Christmas, thieving presents, or maybe taking money directly from people's bank accounts, because we see that happening with record taxation in this country and people struggling with the affordability crisis as we head into the holidays, which I suppose is a nice segue into our first story here.
But you know what? Before you go on, Tamara, you're breaking news here, or you're at least educating me. I didn't know Xmas was controversial.
I didn't either.
Yeah, I can understand. I once accidentally went onto a website called Triple Xmas.
Okay.
But anyway, I can see that. But you're looking very fetching in the Convoy Christmas. Some of my favorite C words. But you know what? That honk honk at the bottom. Tamara Ugolini, what were you thinking? Somewhere in Northwest Toronto, Yara Sachs weeps.
Yeah, she is losing sleep over this acronym that she calls, what did she say? Hong Kong is an acronym for Hail Hitler, which is funny because it's not even an acronym.
Talk about illiterate.
Addictions. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Now, speaking of the cost of living crisis and Justin Trudeau thieving money from bank accounts of Canadians, whether that's illegally seizing it through things like the unconstitutional implementation of the Emergencies Act or just taxing the death out of everyone. Just yesterday, the government, Justin Trudeau and Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, announced that they are cutting the GST, HST exemption across the country on certain goods like groceries, snacks, and kids' clothing. So this new tax break is supposed to apply to prepared foods. As I mentioned, snacks, vegetable trays, pre-made meals and salads, restaurants, candy, chips, and granola bars because, health and wellness. Beer, wine, cider, and alcoholic beverages, because again, health and wellness, children's clothing, toys, board games, dolls, video games, etc. I think there was also, I don't see it in this one, but car seats, which are such a huge investment. Any parents out there would know, a couple $100 just for one car seat that expires after like 5 to 7 years. Anyway, so the tax break is supposed to be in effect until February 15th next year. And this is the way of the Liberals attempting to make life more affordable for Canadians, especially as we head into the holiday season. David, you were there yesterday when they were making this announcement. What was the atmosphere like when you were there?
Oh, no, I was at the Justin Trudeau fundraiser where Blackface once again did the impossible by totally pissing off both sides of the political spectrum. By that, I mean, Tamara Ugolini, you had the pro-Hamas demonstrators there, the people that don't give a tinker's damn about Canada, and the patriots who were there, who very much want to restore our Dominion to its glory days. That would be the pre-Justin Trudeau years of almost a decade ago. But I was looking through that press release. A couple of things stand out to me. First of all, I love the taxes coming off Christmas trees. Oh, but not the decorations. So Blackface wants you to go out, get an evergreen, but I can't afford the taxes on the decorations. Oh, what do you want from me? Just put a bare tree in there like it's a Charlie Brown Christmas. Secondly, Tamara, I noticed some of the items, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm going to zoom in on one of them, diapers. Isn't that already tax exempt? I know you have a ginormous brood there in the Cobourg area. You might know this better than I do, but wasn't diapers already tax exempt?
I was trying to find some of that, what was and wasn't already exempt from the GST, and I don't believe the diapers were, but things like vegetables, milk, grains, canned food, raw meat, and fish are already exempt under the GST. But, I think that it's up to the discretion of the grocer as well, depending on if they actually want to implement I'll have to pay closer attention to my grocery bills, because I hadn't previously realized that certain foods were exempt from GST. And so milk being one of them, and grain, I don't know if that's grain as in, it wouldn't be breads, because those are made grain, manufactured grains. I think it's just things if you buy them raw. If you're buying raw grain or flour, for instance, I don't think that once it's made into a bread, it was previously exempt. But under this new exemption that will only be in place for 2 months, that those prepared foods are exempt. But we already see, they immediately, Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland took to social media and made this announcement, as if they aren't preparing for the election next year. And Canadians in the comments are so funny. They're like, you can't buy us. You aren't giving Canadians a break. You are pausing legislated theft. That one I loved. But also the president of the CFIB, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, Dan Kelly, I really liked the tweet that he put out, because he's already been contacted by small business owners who are saying that this is actually just going to hinder their holiday business. And so they're saying things like the purchases that people have already made in terms of children's clothes, alcohol products, crafts, games, etc. for Christmas and presents. Now they're seeing people coming and trying to return these items with a plan to buy them after December 15th, when the tax break will be implemented. And so, go ahead.
Oh, no. Sorry. Go ahead, Tamara. You're going.
Well, he questions here, and I don't know if we can pull up the tweet that he posted on X. I shared the link of it in our channel. But he says, will this actually take effect on December 15th? That you see a lot of what the Liberals do is smoke and mirrors. There's not even, this isn't a legislated thing. There's not even a functioning parliament, right? Because parliament's been put on pause for, I guess, about a month now, as the Liberals continue to withhold documents pertaining to the Green/Fund. So parliament's not even functioning. This hasn't been legislated. It's not enough lead time to change any point of sale system at the busiest time of year for some of these businesses. The list from government is extremely broad, and there are thousands of products in the gray area, diapers presumably being one of those. The list from the government, will I get CRA, Canada Revenue Agency, penalties and interest if they make mistakes? Businesses aren't clear on this, and that this is too late in the holiday season, because customers will be returning large purchases with the intention of rebuying them after December 14th to save. That's hefty here in Ontario. That's 13% on all of your purchases. That adds up when you're doing a large purchase for Christmas gifts. And then, of course, you have businesses expecting a dead zone of sales after February 15th when it comes back into effect. Plus, one more serious point of contention with all of this is a mere, I guess, 2 months after this GST tax exemption, if it even goes through, is once again re-implemented, the Liberals will be implementing their second, third hike of the carbon tax, and so we'll just be taxed out the Yahoo once again. It seems like it's a good thing on the surface, but then when you get down into the nitty gritty, you find out that wait a minute, this actually isn't really doing anyone any justice.
Tamara Ugolini, you've addressed a lot of points there very adroitly. And I know from listening to talk radio just en route here to Rebel News headquarters, many small retailers were calling in and saying this is going to be a nightmare for them with their cash registers, recalibrating what is tax exempt, what isn't tax exempt. It's only for a temporary time. I also, Pierre Poilievre, I thought, hit a communications touchdown when I'm paraphrasing now, but he basically said what Canadians don't need is a temporary removal of the HST on certain select items, but a permanent removal of the carbon tax, which is killing us for fuel, for home heating, oil, and on it goes. The funny thing there, Tamara, is that Mr. Poilievre has to be careful what he wishes for, because I think he's counting on Justin Trudeau not removing the carbon tax because if he does, that takes away the biggest arrow in Pierre Poilievre's quiver. But I think it's a good bet because we saw how ridiculous Trudeau was a few days ago when he was saying that saving the planet is even more important than food. And so I think Mr. Poilievre is on firm ice there. But if Trudeau ever listens to him, and you know what? Miracles do happen. Remember a few months ago, the Conservatives were saying there's too much immigration. You should slash the numbers. You racist. And then a couple months later, we're slashing immigration. Wait a minute. What happened to the racism argument? So there's that. And one final point on this. It just makes me chuckle. In the list that you showed, Tamara Ugolini, one was the tax coming off alcoholic drinks, as long as it's not above 7% alcohol. Yeah, because Blackface doesn't want us to have that good of a time. Blackface doesn't want us to drown our sorrows with the hard stuff like some scotch, or some wine. No, it's got to be the pre-mixed drinks and the ciders and the beers and those beers that are not the strong beer. And I would argue a lot of Canadians are drinking the strongest stuff they can get their hands on right now.
Yeah, it's not for those Bud Light drinkers. All right, so we have one super chat, and then we're going to get to a couple ads. And Ryerson Gary gives $5. Thank you very much. On Sunday, David's friend Anus told his flunky, take a swipe at Alexa. With Tamara Leach's mischief charge as a comparison point, clearly Anus should be charged with at least counseling to commit murder. I mean, there's another great point in the two-tier policing saga.
Well, first of all, Ryerson Gary, you got to use different words than anus. Tamara Ugolini does not like the word anus. She doesn't even like the word Uranus. Anyway, you're quite right. There is a double standard when it comes to policing. That was right in front of a police officer. It was caught on camera. And to let you know, I have reached out, this was more than 2 days ago, to Toronto Police Service Communications. They have a media relations department that apparently doesn't relate to the media. Well, they did give a comment to our friend Joe Warmington at the Toronto Sun, but not to us, which is kind of strange because Tamara Ugolini, or rather Alexa Lavoie, is a colleague of Tamara's and mine. And you know what? If you're in media relations and you're not going to relate to the media, then why the hell do you have a job in the first place? It is absolutely shocking. But Hamas is controlling the Toronto police right now. And I thought I had almost as disturbing a story as Alexa getting physically assaulted. And that's when 2 Sundays ago, when I was brutally arrested, handcuffed, it was really the Keystone Cops meets the Three Stooges. They couldn't get the cuffs off me. They had to call the fire department to come in with a diamond drill. But when I was coming out of 32 Division, folks, who should be coming in? I couldn't believe it. We caught it on camera. Anus. Yeah. Why was he there? To turn himself in for violating Section 319 of the Criminal Code, which is prohibits the chanting of genocide? Oh, no. He was going there with the homework for the cops to do for next Sunday, and presumably to point out demonstrators on the other side of Bathurst who might have given him impolite gestures or said some nasty stuff. Tamara, I wish I was making this up, but he was in that division for at least half an hour. We were waiting for him to come out, and we just had other things to do. What in blue hell do you think little Anus was doing in there?
Yeah, it seems very strange that he has such a close relationship with the Toronto police, and it's definitely something to keep an eye on, which if there's a lawsuit, I hope that things like that come out in the disclosure process, because otherwise there is no transparency with these entities. And so it's anyone's guess, really. But when there is no transparency, then you're left guessing and your imagination can run pretty wild. So I would say that's the big downfall of the police not being open, not communicating with media, and not being transparent. And that goes for all levels of government as well.
And you know what? Now, when you touch upon government, I think that is the real problem. Believe it or not, folks, I would assume most of my colleagues here at Rebel News We do back the blue. If you defund the police, what do you have? Anarchy, the rule of the jungle. I don't think this is an organic grassroots response to independent media and to peaceful counter demonstrators. I think there are puppet masters behind the scenes. We know Olivia Chow is anti-Semitic. Yeah, that's right. I said it. She won't even show up for the 1-year anniversary of the greatest massacre of Jews since the end of the Holocaust. We know that earlier this year, Prime Minister Trudeau met with Toronto Police Chief Myron Demkiw. Why? The chief isn't answerable to the Prime Minister. What the hell was said there? There is political meddling. And you know what? I got to tell you, I mentioned our friend Joe Warmington of The Sun. He was personal friends with the late, great columnist in The Sun, Bob McDonald. And this is going back many years, Tamara Ugolini. And Bob once told Joe that, you know what? When he was covering City Hall, the only time the police chief showed up at City Hall was once a year, budget day, to see how the budget process was going to affect the police department. Completely legitimate. I can tell you, police chiefs right across the country are routinely showing up at City Hall meetings. Why? They're not politicians. They're there to enforce the law. So there is two-tier policing, and I think it is being mandated by hypocritical two-tier politicking, to be quite frank, Tamara.
Yeah, it's an upside-down world that we're living in. We're going to go to a quick ad read here for the Positive Company. If you have a dog, we've all been there. Our pup goes from full of energy to sick and miserable in an instant and at the worst of times. Then we're calling the vet in the middle of the night or on weekends, trying to find a clinic that will take us in. It's a terrible way to manage your dog's health, not to mention your stress levels and your monthly budget. That's why people are getting the Pet Emergency Kit by Positive. It contains critical medications and supplies that can not only keep you out of the veterinary office, but may even save your dog's life. Their kits contain critical medications like activated charcoal, styptic powder, and more. It might save your dog's life. Head over to positive.com and use code STUDIO to get 15% off your Pet Emergency Kit. And with that, we'll go to a Rebel ad break and come back for more.
What if governments are trying to reinvent the wheel when the greatest teacher of all times has already laid out the perfect blueprint for a constitution for a kingdom of love, faith, and freedom? Introducing the Kingdom of Heaven Freedom Passport. This special edition Freedom Passport captures the foundational truths of love, ethics, and freedom for all. It's a powerful reminder of Jesus's call to love one another and to be part of something bigger that you can carry with you every day. Join the movement, share the truth, and spread the love with your family and friends. Get your Kingdom of Heaven Freedom Passport at freedompassport.ca. And right now, all orders in North America come with free shipping and a free downloadable song with every purchase.
Quality of life matters. Affording groceries and the basics matters. Ottawa has a different agenda. Their energy production cap will cut your family's budget, which means less money in your wallet. We say let common sense prevail. Tell the feds at scrapthecap.ca.
Now, I know, David, we were going to get into some of the scheduled topics, but I just wanted to throw to this video posted on X by Karim Assad, a lawyer and political satirist, who says all hell breaks loose as Pat King exits the courthouse. So he was in court today in Ottawa on charges of mischief and some others. So he has been found guilty of 5 charges and not guilty of 4 charges against him in relation to his involvement with the Freedom Convoy. And I believe that we did a write-up here earlier today. I'll just pull that up. Sheila got to it quickly this morning. But Pat King was identified as a key organizer in the Freedom Convoy, and he used his online presence to, encourage and coordinate the protest activities. And he's finally seen his day in court. And so Sheila's piece here says he's been guilty of 2 counts of mischief. So I guess we'll wait to see a little bit more as the charges against him or the non-guilty findings against him come out. But, this is just 2 years later. You have these individuals who have been found guilty of mischief. And this is absolute craziness that these minor charges have been drawn out this long and have cost, just the cost alone to the taxpayers, millions of dollars in judicial oversight, judges, lawyers, et cetera, for mischief. And for trying to tell people, hey, come stand with us in Ottawa against an increasingly tyrannical government who is acting out of their scope and infringing on all of our civil liberties and civil rights with no end in sight, right? If we remember what life was like that year in January, February 2022, after 2 years of rolling restrictions that were just getting tighter and tighter around the necks of all Canadians. And finally, people had had enough, and they were being continually disregarded and ignored by all levels of government, whether that be municipal, provincial, or federal. And so what is your last resort? It's peaceful protest. And when people took to the streets to do that and to exercise that, this is the fate that they have faced. It's a wild time to be alive here in Canada, but I've been saying that for 4 years now.
Tamara Ugolini, you couldn't have picked a better story to follow up on what we just discussed about two-tier policing, two-tier justice, hypocritical politicians. What is Pat King's sin exactly? We know from the Freedom Convoy that was a peaceful demonstration. We know that crime in Ottawa for the almost 1 month it was there actually went down. The crime went down. I was there for most of the convoy. I can tell you, Tamara Ugolini, and I can tell you the streets were never cleaner. Why? Yeah, it was winter, but not an hour would go by when I would never, when I wouldn't witness somebody with a sweeper and a garbage bag sweeping up cigarette butts, if you can imagine, right? Mm-hmm. And were there any calls for genocide? Was there any calls for violence? Was there any display of swastikas? Oh, yeah, there was that one display. And boy, that's still a mystery to that day. Who was that person holding up that Nazi flag? Who was he affiliated with? Where did they go? That was not someone who was part of the Freedom Convoy. And meanwhile, as I said earlier, we have the Hamas holes for 13 months now chanting genocide on the streets of our great Dominion. There may or may not be a phony Remembrance Day in Mississauga this coming Tuesday, Tamara, where they're going to honor, if you can imagine, dead Hamas terrorists, including Sinwar, the mastermind of October 7th, 2023. And I don't see any charges. No, I see law enforcement bringing these cats coffee and Timbits on cold days, because, when you're going to chant, genocide to the Jews, it can get a little chilly out there and you don't want anyone to go without. This is an unbelievable, example of the dichotomy that we have right now in this country. And if anyone can explain why this exists right now, I'm going to tell you, there's a steak dinner in it for you at Jacob's, because it does not make sense, Tamara. Lady Justice, the icon, standing there with the scales and the sword and the blindfold on. Yeah, well, you know what? Lady Justice these days in Canada, she doesn't have blindfold over her eyes. She's got X-ray glasses on. This is outrageously politically motivated. And here's the sad thing, because I sat in on the closing arguments for Tamara Leach back in the summertime. The X factor, as always, Tamara, and I thought her lawyer, Lawrence Greenspan, did an absolutely stellar job. But the X factor is always the judge, isn't it? We don't know what's in the judge's mind. We don't know if this is a pro-liberal, pro-Trudeau type of person. But even if that's the case, can we just have some consistency? If Pat King faces up to 10 years in the slammer, if you can imagine, then why is it that the Hamas people who are chanting genocide, doing vandalism against Jewish-owned businesses, synagogues, and schools, firebombing, physically assaulting people, and mark my words, Tamara, and I hope I'm wrong about this, it's only a matter of time before one of these bastards kills somebody. Why aren't they even being charged? No, it's peaceful counter demonstrators and members of the non-state approved independent media being charged. This is all I ask. Consistency. Is that too much to ask for? Well, you know what? In Justin Trudeau's Canada, folks, looks like it is.
Yeah, the inability of policing to enforce the law on some of this stuff really just emboldens these protesters. Yep. And I think comments like the one that we will lead into here, where Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says that he will comply with international criminal law and arrest Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu if he enters the country, is going to just further feed into the Hamas supporting protesters as being emboldened to continue to take to the streets to do this. Let's have a look at this clip.
Now that the ICC has issued warrants for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, Canadian law enforcement is obligated to arrest them should they come to Canada. Will you allow that to happen, or will you step in to prevent an arrest?
First of all, as Canada has always said, it's really important that everyone abide by international law. This is something we've been calling on from the beginning of the conflict. We are one of the founding members of the International Criminal Court and International Court of Justice. We stand up for international law, and we will abide by all the regulations and rulings of the international courts. This is just who we are as Canadians.
You know, Tamara Ugolini, I had to watch that clip twice because the first time I was watching it, I was completely distracted by that little goblin, Fraulein Freeland, smiling like the Cheshire Cat. There she goes with her twitching. Is she getting enough sleep? I'm getting concerned about the well-being of the Deputy Prime Minister. But what a disgrace, as you alluded to earlier. Talk about emboldening the Jew haters, right? Justin Trudeau, remember I speculated what did Trudeau say to Chief Demkew? I'll tell you what I think, and I don't have a scintilla of proof, but I bet a donut on it. I think Trudeau said to Chief Demkew, listen, in less than a year, we got an election coming up, and we've done the math. There are 5 times as many Muslims as there are Jews in Canada. And no hard feelings. It's strictly business. And by the way, folks, I want to add a caveat here. I am not saying all the Muslims in Canada support these pro-Hamas terrorist thugs. You know, they absolutely do not. But this is what Trudeau is banking on. So, yeah, to further ingratiate himself with the pro-Hamas demographic, it is a public relations coup, at least Blackface thinks it is, to say, yeah, I'm going to get tough with Bibi should he ever have the audacity to show his face in our dominion. You know what the incredible perverse irony is, Tamara Ugolini? It's the fact that as much as he's catered to this base, I think I mentioned this earlier, as we saw again in Mississauga at that $1,750 a plate fundraiser for Trudeau, you had the pro-Hamas people there, and they were chanting genocide Justin. So even though he says he'll arrest the Prime Minister of Israel, even though he has his despicable Canadian Israeli Jew Yara Sachs go over to the Middle East and get cuddly with pay-for-slay terrorist Mahmoud Abbas, it doesn't matter. You can't please these people. It seems that, and lest we forget, issuing 5,000 visas to Gazans, talk about throwing gasoline on the fire, because we know according to polls, folks, about 80% of Gazans still support Hamas, and not even Arab nations in the Middle East will accept these people. But hashtag welcome to Canada, right? So here we have Trudeau standing on the wrong side of history. Israel is surrounded by evil. Yeah, I'm not exaggerating. It's evil. This war is all about civilization versus savagery. But he feels he's got to make these pronouncements. You know, great front page on the Sun today, Tamara Ugolini, Mr. Cuff Guy. Get it? Not tough guy, cuff guy. And I read the story, and below the story, death toll in Gaza war passes 44,000, says Palestinian officials. Oh, really? Which Palestinian officials? Hamas? Oh, wait a minute. Well, okay, that must be legit. Yeah, they're capable of murder, kidnapping, torture, beheading. But surely they wouldn't lie. They wouldn't fudge the numbers. And by the way, 44,000 in such a small territory. Tamara Ugolini, I hate to be impolite, but where are the bodies?
Yeah, a lot of it really, and sadly, doesn't make sense. And those numbers are highly contestable and should deserve to be scrutinized. And I think a lot more people are starting to think about that and not take things at face value. And if it's been any indication the last 4 years that you cannot trust this data and the numbers put out by certain biased organizations without a grain of salt, I think that more people are seeing that now. But you know, back to the way that the Liberals are conducting themselves and Trudeau's comments, you have also our Foreign Affairs Minister, Melanie Joly, basically reiterating his same sentiments that Canada will abide by its obligation under the ICC treaty. So these are almost like thinly veiled deflections onto other governing bodies that, it reads to me like our hands are tied, but we're going to do this thing because another entity told us that we're part of, that we have to. Here's her remarks.
The U.S. says that they don't like the ICC's decision that Benjamin Netanyahu should be arrested. Do you agree with the U.S. or do you agree with the ICC that this is a good decision to put out a warrant?
So I'll let the U.S. take its own decisions. When it comes to us, the Prime Minister was asked that question earlier today. So I think that we should all remind ourselves that the situation in Gaza is absolutely catastrophic. Too many women and children have been killed. And at the same time, hostages need to be released. And Weinstein's remains need to be returned to her family and to her daughter, Iris, which I'm in close contact with. And that's why we need a ceasefire. And that's been Canada's position for a long, long time. Now, Canada is a founding member of the ICC. Canada has always believed not only that international law is important, but international law needs to apply to all parties at all times. And at the same time, in order to do so, we need accountability in our world. And so based on that, Canada will abide by its obligation under the ICC treaty.
If Mr. Netanyahu or Mr. Dave set foot on Canadian soil, they would be arrested.
So what I've said is we will abide by our treaty obligations because we believe in international accountability. We believe in the ICC. Now, I won't give an hypothetical answer based on a hypothetical question, but my point is Canada, founding member, has signed the treaty and therefore needs to follow its obligations.
Yeah, so the answer is yes. And you know, Tamara Ugolini, is it just me, but with every passing week, inexplicably, why is it Melanie Joly is getting blonder and blonder? She's one bottle of peroxide away from being the spokeswoman for the Aryan nations, for goodness sakes. But, this is absolutely despicable. Again, let's be clear about the death toll, even if it is disproportionate. I don't remember, and I've read a lot of books about the history of warfare, Tamara Ugolini, but I have never seen in history a nation, namely Israel, go to war with one hand always tied behind its back, which is to say, whenever it's going to flush out these Hamas rats and, take out the terrorists, they announce it. They do flyovers and drop leaflets. And now, because of the modern world we live in addition to that, they go on social media and they say, do not be in this area. So what I'm getting at is there is a huge difference. Whatever the casualty number is, there's a huge difference in terms of collateral damage of human beings being killed. Let's face it, war is messy. And what happened on October 7th, 2023, a deliberate massacre of almost 1,200 innocent civilians, plus the kidnapping of 250 more. If Melanie Joly and Blackface and Yara Sachs, the biggest self-hating Jew in Canada, can't understand that, well, they better give their heads a shake, because that is the hard reality on the ground.
And well, what about this NDP MP, Heather McPherson, who was wearing the Hamas poppy, was wearing this watermelon pin as though it was a poppy for Remembrance Day in the House of Commons. We have the clip here.
Mr. Speaker, a UN report has found that Israel's warfare in Gaza is consistent with the characteristics of genocide. The Liberal government is legally obligated by the Genocide Convention to prevent and stop Netanyahu's attack on Palestinians. Turning a blind eye to mass casualties is not an option. Entire families have been decimated. Children are starving to death. When will the Liberals live up to their obligations, sanction Netanyahu and his extreme cabinet, and finally put in place an actual arms embargo?
Here.
Mr. Speaker.
Tamara Ugolini, again, thank you for educating me, because when I originally saw that clip, I thought that was half of the Pride Progress rainbow. The other half had fallen off. And by the way, for all you lefties out there who are so gung-ho on the LGBTQ XYZ PP2SI, how are your queer constituents treated in a place like Gaza? Well, if you want to find out, buy them a ticket. One way, by the way, you don't need a return trip if you're openly gay, lesbian, bisexual, or trans, because the preferred method of execution is to go up a tall building, those that remain, and fall to your death. Well, not fall, you're pushed, actually. But evidently, that's the Palestinian symbol. So you're right, Tamara Ugolini. What an upside down world we're living in today.
Well, and I saw that I made a flub there about the Hamas poppy, but that's because it's not far off. There has been the appropriation of the Canadian poppy, and I'm just going to put a link here. And the appropriated poppy is down toward, I would say about halfway down the Toronto Sun article by Joe Warmington. And it's poppies for Palestine. And this is absolutely crazy, that they're taking such a renowned symbol of freedom and independence for Canada and exploiting it in such a way. So for anybody who doesn't know that is a thing, there it is. There's one of the posters where the poppy has been appropriated by this agenda.
Yeah, and Tamara Ugolini, I hope the Legion sues them into the Stone Age, but I'm not hopeful. The Legion has gone woke, but usually they're very, militant in protecting the poppy and the slogan "Lest We Forget," which is being used again for that repulsive fake Remembrance Day that might be canceled. There was some posting recently, Tamara, on social media that the event is off, to honor Sinwar and the rest of the rats. And it was due to safety reasons. I guess what they mean by that is they're afraid of a huge counter demonstration. And, that's really funny, because I thought those cats are all into martyrdom. We'll die fighting the fight. And, oh, boy, we get to go to the afterlife and get our 72 voluptuous black-eyed virgins. And, Tamara, think about that. Not 71 or 73, right? 72. not blue-eyed, black-eyed, not skinny, but voluptuous, not sluts, but virgins. Yeah, it's all laid out like contract language. Oh, and by the way, folks, when I was in Israel many years ago, taking a seminar on terrorism, one of the people there went up to the expert, because at the time there was a rash of female suicide bombers in the Middle East. And she said, hey, I'm not trying to be funny or anything, but when that lady goes to the great hereafter, what's her reward? And I was expecting Tamara to hear something like 72 muscular Chippendale men or something like that. Oh no, the way it works is that she gets reincarnated as one of the virgins for the next suicide male bomber to make use of for eternity. Can you believe this is the mindset we're dealing with? And it's now here in Canada?
That's the scary part, is the influx and the infiltration into Canada. And that's why I think when we were out and we went with our Stand with David, Rebels Unite at the Bathurst and Shepherd protest last weekend, I think such an important question to ask is, are you a Canadian citizen? You know, where does your allegiance lie? Is it with Canada, or is it with a foreign interest or a foreign entity or a foreign government?
And so the answer is evident in the flags. It's the Palestinian flag. Sometimes I see the flag of Turkey, of Pakistan, the Iranian regime flag, not the flag that the Persian Canadian demonstrators wave. And the way you can tell them apart, folks, is the good Persians wave the Iranian flag with the lion on it, and the bad ones, you know, like Majid Johari, the federal MP for Richmond Hill. It's funny that, Tamara, I live in Richmond Hill, have for over 25 years. I think the Persian population, very significant. Last I saw, 14%. Every single one of the people I've met in my city are great people. They're running businesses, fabulous restaurants. They fled the tyranny of the regime. How the hell is it that the guy that's the federal MP for the riding of Richmond Hill is pro-regime? Yet again, another example of the world is upside down. But yeah, to get to your point, the very fact that they don't wave a Canadian flag, and only once at Shepherd and Bathurst did I see the pro-Hamas set, one guy wearing a poppy. But yeah, you guessed it, Tamara Ugolini, he was co-opting the poppy. He was displaying a homemade poster about the Palestinian Holocaust. Yeah, so they do the appropriation of Holocaust too. Very odd that too, these people deny the Holocaust as they try to manufacture another one, actually.
Now we have a couple super chats, rumble rants, I should say, to get through. Ryerson Gary gives another $5. He said, good news, the police supervisor, and so this is in reference to the protest that we're talking about right now. Good news, the police supervisor that told Ezra he had to go to the area reserved for media acknowledged that Toronto police recognize Rebel News as a real and legitimate news and media outlet. Yeah, that's a positive take.
Wow, it's the Christmas miracle in November.
Alberta Dawn gives another $5. Thank you. Two-tier policing. Tommy Robinson said years ago that when dealing with Islam, there's always the threat of violence. If a popular Muslim is arrested for promoting genocide, expect consequences. Yeah, it's really bizarre to be living in the writing that was put on the wall by people like Tommy Robinson in the UK, who saw it coming into their nation first, you know, I guess it was about a decade ago. And now we see the fallout happening here in Canada, and to a lesser extent, but still in the United States as well.
And Tamara, I want to address that point based on the 5 weeks at Shepherd and Bathurst, which is a Jewish area where for more than a year now, the pro-Israel people have assembled, not really for a demonstration or a protest. It's really a vigil. They're there, you know, longing for the return of the kidnapped victims, at least those who are still alive. And for 5 weeks, the pro-Hamas people have showed up to chant genocide, display swastikas, you know, same old, same old. Here's the deal. I think when we've seen, you know, hundreds and hundreds of these Hamas holes show up on the streets, the police say, It's no longer about law enforcement. It's about keeping the peace. So yeah, they're breaking the law, but you know what? We're going to turn a blind eye and a deaf ear because we just don't have the resources. Okay. Even if you buy that, and I don't buy that, if you don't have the resources, call for backup. If you don't have enough backup, call in the army, for God's sakes. I don't care. But even if that's the case, at Bathurst and Shepherd, I can tell you the first week we went there, Tamara, which was week 2, I counted, or I estimated, about 40 pro-Israel demonstrators to every one Hamas demonstrator. So in other words, they were vastly outnumbered by the peaceful demonstrators on the Israel side. So when they started acting up, when they started chanting genocide, when they started displaying swastikas, the cops could have arrested them because it wasn't a mob situation. You have the good people outnumbering the hooligans by a factor of 40-1. What did we see instead? I witnessed it myself. There was somebody on the Jewish side who allegedly did the throat slash thing. And Little Anus and company, they went crying to the cops and said, oh, boo-hoo, he hurt our feelings. Next thing you know, that gentleman was being arrested by 8 police officers for a hand gesture across his throat. So they're still doubling down on hypocrisy and two-tier policing, even when they're not outnumbered. Tamara, you were gracious enough, and by the way, I want to thank you so much. I'm going to put a little extra in your Christmas stocking this year. You can count on it for coming to our event on Sunday, where we reclaimed a little piece of our dominion. But you saw that there were more cops than there were Palestinian demonstrators that day. I'm not making up. There were 40 police cruisers in the metro parking lot alone. We counted them. And yet they still allowed them to break Section 319. So it's no longer a numbers game. It's no longer, you can use the argument, hey, what can we do? We're outnumbered. Nope. Like I said, Hamas in the city of Toronto, in the Dominion of Canada, is calling the shots. And I think it's political.
Yeah, and just something, and before we get to this ad read, because we still have a couple topics to touch on, but you want to talk about the symbolism of going, the throat like this. There was a woman who had the Hamas triangle.
Yep.
The red triangle, who was like motioning in my face with that triangle, and it looked almost like it was, I don't know if she had it made or if it was like some sort of traffic symbol. It was reflective. And the edges looked so sharp. And to have somebody coming into your face with this sharp object, clearly trying to be intimidating and threatening with it by putting it in my face and flashing it around and making sure that I saw it as like, you're a target. That is really intimidating and really something that I wasn't quite, you hear about these things, and I've seen it happening on the streets, and I've seen it happening to you, David, and it's disturbing then. But when you see it for yourself and you experience it firsthand, there's a next level of intimidation. Yeah, this individual here, I see she has that triangle, and I'm sure we have footage somewhere. There was, I think, like 10 of us recording. And so our editor is trying to sift through literally hours of footage times however many people were recording to compile it all into, I think it's going to be about an hour-long report by the time it's all said and done. But we'll probably have more footage of that individual in there because it was really strange and bizarre. And I was really not in the thick of things. I kind of stayed on the outskirts, and I was just trying to capture an overview from the sidelines of what was happening and getting good documentation. I did get into the thick of it a few times, but for the most part, I kind of stayed to the side and just watched and recorded. And so the people on the side, there wasn't a lot of police on the side, and there wasn't our security on the side. So some of these individuals became more emboldened than they would have otherwise been if they were part of, the police and security team that was there. And so if someone was arrested and swarmed and taken down by police for simply going like this, I don't know why someone could go into people's faces with a triangle with sharp edges and motion to them as though they're a target and walk away scot-free. Again, another piece in the puzzle of two-tier policing. But I think we've really driven that point home.
Oh, I got news for you. You're being way too diplomatic when you call that an act of intimidation. It actually qualifies as assault. And by that, it's been explained to me that you don't even have to make contact with assault. If you get right into somebody's grill and like you do this with your fist, police can charge you with assault, because the intent is a follow through. You don't have to just stand there and be a victim and have 3 teeth knocked out of your jaw, your mouth. So what you endured that day was technically assault, witnessed by multiple police officers. The fact that triangle had sharp edges, I know the one you're talking about. That is a weapon. That's really no different than a knife. In fact, you can make the argument it's a 3-bladed knife. And again, nothing to see here, folks. Move along. But somebody across the street doing a throat gesture, throw the book at him, handcuff him behind his back, throw him in a cruiser, take him down to 32 Division. I am getting sick of this, Tamara Ugolini.
Yeah, same. Now, in lighter, brighter news, a positive that I'm trying to focus and feature is the MAHA movement happening across the United States with the appointment of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to lead Trump's Health and Human Services Department, who's proposing sweeping reform to the federal health agency, is something that I hope that we will see here in Canada. But this movement to make America healthy again, I think is so much needed, especially in America. But again, also, I think there's a lot of room for that similar style reform and health revolution to come here into Canada. And that's what leads me into this next ad, which is the Kids Guide. So with President Trump's historic victory, I need to ask parents to please listen up. Now that President Trump is heading back into the White House, he said he wants to teach our kids to love our country. And the best place for them to start is to learn all about President Trump and his vision for America in his second term. That's why Mike Huckabee's team put together the Kids Guide to President Trump. And to celebrate President Trump's victory, they're giving it away for free. With fun illustrations and easy to follow content, this important guide teaches kids all about President Trump's accomplishments during his first term, and it helps kids to understand his goals for his second term. Mike Huckabee wants to send your family this free guide so you can teach your kids the truth. But please hurry because supplies are limited. To claim your free kids guide to President Trump right now, visit kidstrumpguide.com. That's kidstrumpguide.com.
Mary Galini, are you going to get the Kids Guide for your kids?
Well, you know, some of these ads are US based. So with our Canada Post strike happening here, I'm not sure that we would be able to get a guide here in Canada. But if it's available, absolutely. There is a fun US based company that I've supported before in terms of trying to get my kids some more freedom oriented actual novels and education. And that was I don't know if you've heard of them, the Tuttle Twins. And they run a company, they do a show. Actually, I think they're now on the Daily Wire, if I remember correctly, with their cartoon and their show. But they put together a series, and it teaches kids everything, like from the economy to their rights and freedoms, but it is very US centric. And so unfortunately, that's the closest thing that we have in the conservative sphere to try to teach and educate our kids with this material and this content. But there doesn't seem to be a whole lot that's Canada specific. So yeah, oftentimes we have to look to the US for kind of the other side of the story in the education and show TV realm, because a lot of it's very heavily focused on left-leaning liberal propaganda, especially, you know, there's CBC Kids that like promotes trans surgeries to children and things like this. So that obviously we steer very much clear of. But if anybody has experience with the Tuttle twins, if not, look into it. I highly recommend their novel series. There's a free plug for them. But we have one more.
Tamara Ugolini, before you go on, I gotta just put up the stop sign. I'm not accepting your excuse of a Canada Post strike. Yes, they are hitting the bricks, but you have heard of courier services. Oh, but by the way, if you are going to use one, don't use FedEx, folks. They've got some problems with employees going off the reservation, and they're deciding which packages are good and which will be, as Elvis Presley once sung, return to sender, namely anything that has to do with Israel. Some employees are pretending that's on the prohibited countries list. Check out my video about that. And speaking of the mail strike and trans surgery, as you mentioned, Tamara, folks, stay tuned for my report. We went a couple of days ago to the picket line out in Mississauga. And our question was, in addition to asking for a 24% wage increase and benefits, do you know one of the demands is that the posties want Canada Post to pay for transgender surgery? Can you imagine? So, and by the way, Canada Post, it's in a $3 billion deficit situation. What do you make of that, Tamara Ugolini? If you want to become a he and I want to become a she, that Canada Post is on the hook for this?
Yeah, it's pretty absurd. Although I did like that the those who were out on the picket line had no idea about this. So again, like, where's the transparency with these demands and these union members? They don't even really fully grasp and understand what they're out there bargaining for. It's like, people need to get informed. Honestly, I have no words, because I'm like, how can you be so uninformed? And maybe we do need our own little literacy booklet, but has proper grammar to go out with it to properly inform people of what exactly they're doing. Like, people are just expect the TV and the headlines to do the thinking for them, and they just aren't capable of delving a little bit below the surface to see things for what they really are. It was shocking to me that they didn't even know that about their bargaining negotiations.
But one thing I took away from it, Tamara Ugolini, was the fact that a lot of them laughed out loud when I was educating them about, and it was preposterous. And no, they aren't going to take advantage of gender affirming care. But what that showed to me was how ludicrously woke Cup W is, the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. That,
not surprising, right?
Yeah, that even the rank and file, A, don't know about this demand, and B, have absolutely no intention of following through on gender bender surgery. Unbelievable.
All right, just to hit the headline here, our last piece is on the Greenpeace protesters arrested outside Pierre Poilievre, leader of the opposition's official residence. So this the CBC featured this one yesterday. Activists chained themselves to a pumpjack replica outside of Stornoway, his residence, and so they were arrested. But they were there protesting his anti-climate agenda. And then they give some statements here in the article. I don't know if we have time or want to run some of that clip. It's about 2 minutes. But they said about a dozen people were gathered outside of his residence shortly after 7 a.m. and they blocked access to the residence with a structure, and some proceeded to chain themselves to the structure, not allowing the family to pass. Like, this is unhinged.
Despicable. And Tamara Ugolini, to tie this back to one of our earlier stories regarding Mr. King being found guilty on mischief charges, did Pat King or Tamara Leach do this? Did they chain themselves to anything? Did they go to anyone's personal residence? No. So you know what, my friend? We have to follow up on what kind of sentences these actual criminals are going to get. And I bet you they're going to walk. They won't do a day in jail. You watch.
Well, and it's like, as I think Trudeau's jet setting out of the country to go lecture Canadians on adhering to the carbon tax, even though they can't afford to eat or heat their homes, here comes Greenpeace targeting Pierre Poilievre for his supposed anti-climate agenda because he wants to cancel the carbon tax and all these new clean fuel regulations. This is absolutely upside down, bizarro world. And again, if these I think that if these individuals were actually informed on what was happening in the global sphere and not just taking headlines at face value, they too would be like, okay, a lot of this actually doesn't make sense. There seems to be a lot of hypocrisy in what's going on here. I mean, do they know about the Green Slush Fund? This is crazy. The fact that they've gone to this extent to block Pierre Poilievre and his family into their house based on this false notion that he is anti-climate. This is just uninformed, absolute nonsense, in my opinion.
Yeah, but Tamara Ugolini, let's be fair here. Can you actually blame them? I mean, look who the Minister of Environment and Climate Change is. He's a convicted criminal who trespassed on the CN Tower. Wasn't he involved in coming up, going on somebody's roof, right?
When he was with Greenpeace.
Yeah.
This organization.
So what happened to him? Jail time? Well, a little bit maybe, but then promoted to cabinet.
Now
so
we all pay his salary.
Yeah, you fail upwards in blackfaces, Canada.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't see him on trial for 4 counts of mischief and being let off on the other 5. That's for sure. We have one more super chat and then we'll wrap things up here. I reckon Kenzie67 gives $5. Thank you very much. I reckon the protests would reduce pretty quickly if uncovered faces were required and enforced. Yeah, that was one major thing that I observed when we were there, is just how many on the Hamas side were masked and hiding their identities. And you can tell that it's not any sort of like religious thing either. They're very clearly just there as instigators and they don't want to be identified. And then on the other side, just full normal faces, people just being happy, dancing to music. You could really feel the difference in energy between the two sides when you were on either one. And that to me was one of the most notable things, was how many people were hiding their identity. And of course, they're the ones who are the agitators. They're coming. There was one guy in particular who his scarf dropped a few times and I got some visuals of his face, but he was swarming. There was a couple of them that were responsible for swarming some of us, especially, as I said, on the sidelines where there wasn't a police line and the security was more focused on kind of the heat of the inner, circle of the rally. And they would swarm. They swarmed our camera woman, Avery, a couple times when she was just going up and filming them, like not even saying anything. And they would just swarm her. And they did that to Efron and myself as well. And again, there was no police, no security. Everybody else was filming, kind of you, Ezra, and elsewhere. And so they were looking and waiting for those opportune times to swarm and intimidate other people on the outskirts. And that was very clear to me, which is why I wanted to kind of stay on the outskirt and document some of that, because there's really a clear, and you want to talk about mischief and what was Tamara Leach charged with, counseling others to commit mischief. There was a lot of that going on, and they were kind of meeting in the parking lot tucked behind the RBC building that was there. And so, I don't know if there's any undercover police that are monitoring or watching for things like that, but I could see it as my first time being out in the wild at this particular location. And so if I can see it, you can't be that ignorant as police to also not be aware that this is happening under your watch.
Well, Tamara, you've said a lot of things that are important there. I think we have to amend the Criminal Code of Canada so that you cannot wear a mask at a demonstration. We already have something on the books, I understand, about a prohibition on wearing masks during a riot. And I guess it comes down to semantics in terms of what's a riot and what isn't. But I would go even further at a protest. I would say in public, with the exemption of Halloween, you do not wear a mask. And I would include the niqab and the burqa. If you want to wear that at home, you have every right to do so. But in public, it is inherently unfair for us not to see the identity of other people. If somebody wearing that garb, and for all we know, could be a man. This is how terrorists have snuck out of Arab nations. A while back in Philadelphia, there was a rash of jewelry store robberies by men in burqas. They didn't know they were men in burqas, and that's the point, because you can't see the person. But if you're to get assaulted, stabbed, whatever, and you can't name the offender, then you are at an inherent disadvantage. And if you're going to call me an Islamophobe, I don't give a rodent's rectum. This is part of our Western values. We do not have our women walking around in garbage bags. And that's the way it's got to be, because as we know, public safety always comes first, but not necessarily so much these days, thanks to political correctness. One other thing, Tamara, I think this masking thing got out of hand during the pandemic, quite frankly. You will remember that once upon a time, if you walked into a bank and wearing a mask, the teller is already pushing the silent alarm button. But a few years ago, you walk into a bank without a mask on, you're being screamed at and refused service. You know, another horrible side effect of the garbage we went through with COVID-19. Anyways, that's my position. Unless it's Halloween, you don't wear a mask in public, period. It doesn't have to be a riot. That makes it fair for everyone. You say what, Tamara Ugolini?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it would be important to identify some of these individuals who act this way and intimidate and threaten. And if, even if you want to go so far as assault others out in the field, so that they can be readily identified and appropriately dealt with. And so, yeah, I completely agree in that way. We're going to wrap the stream up. So join us again on Monday, where we're same time and place, 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern, here on Rebel News. Don't forget to order your nice Christmas swag from the Rebel News store and put Rebel Xmas as your coupon code to save 15% off of your total order. Have a great weekend, everyone. David Menzies, last words go to you.
Stay safe and stay sane.
Listen, I'm not going to comment on everything that certain right-wing Americans have to say about Canada, particularly when it's based on misinformation or disinformation. I'd point out that it was conservative governments in this country that previously slashed defense funding, that let our defense spending go below 1%. And it is this Liberal government that is stepping up significantly on investing in our military, on making up for the underinvestment by the Conservative Stephen Harper, Pierre Poilievre government, and actually making sure we can do our share and more than our share, because Canadians always step up significantly when it comes to global challenges and conflicts.